Thank you for joining me today. My name is Rhonda Hoffman. I'm the genealogy specialist with the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Today's topic is death record substitutes. I work in a place called the Grosvenor Room, which is our special collections department. The Grosvenor Room has genealogy, local history, maps, music scores, and rare books. We're open the same hours as the rest of the library. The only time you'd ever need to make an appointment to visit us is if you wanted to view a rare book, and it would tell you in our online catalog whether something is a rare book. So today we're going to talk about finding pre-1914 Erie County deaths in the Grosvenor Room and beyond. 1914 is the chosen date because that's when it's generally considered that there's full compliance with the registration of death records for New York State. Though I've heard some circumstances where, certain ones maybe weren't recorded beyond then. And there's a lot of places to look, so get ready for it. Okay, so I told you that the handout was emailed to everyone who registered before the class gets started, and we'll post this video to YouTube channel. We're going to start with the low-hanging fruit. So first, a good place to start is Ancestry Library Edition or Ancestry.com if you have a subscription from home. The library has a subscription to Ancestry Library Edition, and it's available at every one of our locations in Buffalo and Erie County Public Libraries. And how you would access it is to go to our website, buffalolib.org, select Research and Resources, and then under Research, choose Databases A to Z. This does have to be used in library. They don't allow us to let you use it from home, but you can use it at any library that's closest to your home. And what you want to do is from here, you can scroll down to the A section for Ancestry Library. And once you're in Ancestry, you could do an all collection search under the search menu. And then you can input as much or as little information that you know about the person that you're searching for. I usually like to start with a first and last name. So I'm starting with Israel Aaron, the town or county where they lived. So I put Buffalo. If you know an approximate birth year, that's a good thing to input, especially if you have a common name. I put 1860, and that's a good place to start. So here's a number of results for Israel Aaron, and you can limit your results to birth, marriages, and deaths to the left if you'd like to do that. And then if you're getting a number of hits from a foreign country and you don't want that, you can choose North America to filter the foreign results out. And then you've got a lot of different hits. You can narrow it down even more to the left if you want to limit it to deaths, burials, cemetery, and obituaries. One of the first things you usually see that comes up is Find a Grave, which is a free website. And then we see some different newspaper obituaries as well. And we'll talk about obituaries in a little bit. But first, Find a Grave. So you can search this in Ancestry, but of course, it's also a free website. And you could search it directly if you wanted to. So if you searched for Israel Aaron, and you could just put the cemetery location, I often just put the county. And sometimes, we don't know what's on gravestones. So I don't usually do exact searches, especially for the year born and year died. You're not quite sure what's going to be on that stone. And then you'll get your hit. There is a hit for Israel D. Aaron. And you'll see the basic information. You've got his birth. You've got his death. His burial is at Forest Lawn Cemetery. It has the plot number. And you can see there are pictures of the gravestones. And what you always want to make sure that you look at is the Photos tab. And with that, the person who made this entry or others might have added different documents. So in this case, you can see we have some newspaper articles, and those other documents are cemetery records, and those are from Forest Lawn Cemetery. Forest Lawn has a great website, so you're very lucky if one of your ancestors was buried there. From their website, you can go to search burial records. And you can do, when you're searching the records, you're searching not just Forest Lawn, but all of these other cemeteries that you see listed here. And you can just put in the name that you're searching for. And we got a hit for Israel Aaron, and you can see that there's a number of documents that they have scanned and put online. We'll start with the death register book. So this is what these usually look like. And you can see that there is the individual's names, and you can see they all start with the same letter. So these are in alphabetical groupings, but they're not in alphabetical order. They're typically in order by where it says the time of death. It's, roughly in date order by the same letter of the last name grouping. And it lists the place of birth, the place of death, the date of death, marital status, the residence, the age in years, months, and days, the cause of death, and then you've got the location of the grave, the lot and section number, the undertaker, where, maybe that still exists, that undertaker, and maybe you can get further records, and then there's a remarks column that sometimes you'll see information like if they were reinterred from another cemetery to Forest Lawn or vice versa, or if they died out of the area, sometimes you'll see that type of remark too. So here's Mr. Aaron's entry, and he was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it gives his address, 748 Auburn. It tells us that he died of nephritis, and then it's got the lot and the section number and the undertaker, Brady. So next we'll look at the lot register. So this gives a nice diagram of where the persons in this lot are buried. You can see that Reverend Aaron is listed as number 1. So you can see number 1 and number 4 on the map. And you can see that the second person is Emma Falk Aaron, and she died in 1933. And it says that she was the owner of the plot. And then usually it'll tell the relationship of everyone else that's buried there to the owner of the lot. So Israel is her husband. And the plot register is a really great place, especially if this couple had children and they had women who, if you don't know who they married or what happened to them, it's a good place to find those female relatives when you don't know their married name and you lose them. You might find them in the cemetery plot with their married name. And then there are burial permits. And these are wonderful documents. They have about the same information as the registers that we looked at, but they do have additional information. And that additional piece of information is very important. It's his parents' names, Moses Aaron and Lizette Greenbaum. The Grosvenor Room has many different cemeteries on microfilm or transcribed records and books. And we have a website that has many guides and publications. So we do have a cemetery record guide. If you just click on that link, Church and Cemetery Records, you'll see cemetery records for Erie County. And this list is in order alphabetically by the town that the cemetery is located in. So you can see Buffalo first. And it'll tell you specifically what we have. So you can see whether it's, if it has a call number, that's generally a book, like where it says F129.B8C35, that's a call number. Whereas you might see a number of things, especially in the Wings Western New York Genealogical Society collection, where it says ML228. Those are usually microfilm numbers. Or if you see like under Cheektowaga, Reel 3, Reel 5, those are microfilm reels, and our staff can help you find those records. We also have under that church and cemetery record guides some listings of burials for Mount Calvary, Buffalo Cemetery, Pine Lawn, Ridgelawn, United German and French. We have a partnership with the Mount Calvary group where they give us a list of the burials. So this burial list is accurate up to April of 2022. So you can see everyone's name, the date of death, the cemetery, the section, the lot, the grave number. Next, newspapers. The library has a wonderful resource called the Local History File. It's a card file, and it has subjects in alphabetical order. And besides looking up people's names, which we'll talk about in a moment, you can also look up under cemeteries to learn some background information to cemeteries in the area. So we just look alphabetically under cemeteries, and then there are subcategories. So for example, a lot of people come in to the Grosvenor Room and ask about Potter's Fields, where those might have been located. And we have some entries for that. So this was a Potter's Field at Maston and Best in Buffalo. And it refers you to articles. And the bottom card, there's a stamp that says Grosvenor Room vertical file. And if you see that, or a VF, like on the top card, that means that we've copied it and put it for you in a vertical file that we have in the room. There are entries by cemetery names also. So here's Pine Hill Cemetery, and there's an entry on delinquency and vandalism in the Buffalo area. So you might wonder, what happened to my ancestor's gravestone? If it was vandalized somewhere, if it's missing, maybe this is when something happened to my ancestor's gravestone. This is also a great way to find out where, if a cemetery no longer exists, what happened to it. Were the bodies reinterred? And that was the case for the North Street Cemetery, which was removed in the early 1900s. Many of the references that you'll find on these cards either point you to newspaper articles or scrapbooks, and a lot of them for North Street Cemetery are in scrapbooks. We have about 400 scrapbooks in the Grosvenor Room, and the North Street Cemetery clippings are in this volume, Buffalo Military Affairs, because the cemetery was removed to make way for a new armory. The scrapbooks are great for images. There are many photos of the cemetery, which, obviously no longer exists, so you can see what it used to look like. There's even images of when the bodies were being transferred. And there are articles which could name some of your ancestors as being buried there. And for North Street Cemetery, money was given to the heirs of those who were buried there. So you can see a list of the people who were buried there and how much money the heirs were supposed to receive. And if you had any prominent ancestors that might have been buried there. There are several articles related to those who are prominent that were buried there. The local history file also has indexed a lot of obituaries, so you can look up your ancestor's name, and that's a reference again to a scrapbook. We have a large dozens of books in our local biography scrapbooks, and there are a lot of obituaries, but you'll find other articles about your ancestors as well. A great book to find early obituaries is this one right here, Erie County, New York Obituaries as found in the files of the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society. It covers 1811 through 1880, and it doesn't list what newspapers these obituaries were found in, but it does abstract some information so that you know an obituary does exist, and you could start looking for it through Buffalo newspapers. The Western New York Genealogical Society's website has a list of over 100,000 Buffalo newspaper obituaries. You simply go to the Resources tab and click Buffalo, New York Deaths. This information was donated by a lady named Janice Wernicke, who indexed approximately 130,000 deaths. She used to come in and use the microfilm machines here at the Grosvenor Room. And she has some information associated with the deaths. So she gave the society some of the clippings. Not everything has obituary clippings, but some of them do. So you can keyword search for a name. And if you find something, then you could contact the Western New York Genealogical Society for a copy of that. And if you're a member, you would get a scan of that for free. If you're a non-member, it would be $5. Or, with the information that you find here, you may be able to look it up in the newspaper itself. Ancestry also has indexes to newspapers.com. You can go to the search menu and go down to card catalog. And I usually search for newspapers.com obituary. And at the bottom there, you can see US newspapers.com obituaries index. It's usually good to just put in a first name, last name, a range of years if you've narrowed it down to when the person would have died. So I put 1900 plus or minus 5 years. And you want to put the location of the newspaper publication. And then you'll get a listing. If you subscribe to Ancestry.com from home, and you also subscribe to newspapers.com, you could click on that image and then access it from home. The library does not have a subscription to newspapers.com, but the details here, it gives the obituary date and the obituary newspaper. And we have most of Buffalo's newspapers on microfilm here in the Grosvenor Room. So you could come in and find that in the Grosvenor Room. But you could also, with the exact date of death or with the information found here, you can contact the library, and we offer free obituary lookups. We'll send them for free to you through email. To do that, from our webpage, you just go to Research Services and then request obituaries, death notices. You can do up to 3 at a time if you have a full name and exact date of death. So I mentioned if you subscribe to newspapers.com, then you could access that obituary from home. There are lots of Buffalo newspapers in here, all the way up to modern day for Buffalo and some of the other towns, local towns. This is also available at the Buffalo newspapers, I should say, are available at the Buffalo History Museum Library. The Grosvenor Room has a guide to the different Western New York newspapers that we have on microfilm. And you can see the title, the years that we have, if there's any alternate titles, and then the format, whether it's going to be on microfilm or whether it's boxed up printed newspapers that we have to retrieve for you from our storage. We also have a really handy guide called Death Notices and Obituaries, Finding Deaths in Buffalo and Erie County Newspapers. Staff have gone through different, especially really popular newspapers, and found where if it's likely there are obituaries and where those obituaries are usually found in the newspapers. So for example, here we see the Buffalo Morning Express for the time frame 1846 through 1926. And you can see different eras of the newspaper there. And for example, from 1846 to 1880, usually there are 4 pages to the newspaper. There's no index or list of the deceased like on the front page. That there aren't very many death notices, but if there are, they're usually found in the bottom right-hand corner of page 2 or the last page. And longer obituaries are usually rare. The library has digitized some of its newspapers. They can be found on the library's digital collections webpage. Once you're at the page, you just click on the newspapers category. And you can see the newspapers that we have here. So the early ones, you can see we have the different versions of the Buffalo Daily Republic. And if you were to click on one of those links, it would take you to New York State Historic Newspapers, which is a free website where lots of libraries and archives put their digitized newspapers for use. And you could search the collection overall in that search box that you see to the top left. Or if you're looking for a particular county, you could click on one of the counties on the map. So here I've selected Erie County, and then you can see all of the newspapers and the date ranges there. So you could unselect all of those. If you wanted to pick a particular newspaper or a few different newspapers, you could then reselect which newspapers that you'd like to search. If you wanted to search across all of these, you could search in that box. If you wanted to just see one of those newspapers, you could click on the title. And then what you would see here is a list of the different dates that are here. And I think this is really helpful because you can see there are some gaps in the collection. So if you're not finding something, then you'll know that it's not in there. And I also wanted to point out that sometimes the dates can be misleading. So for example, this is the Buffalo News, and it says the newspapers are in there from 1880 to 1982. And you can see that 1880 isn't in here. And these newspapers aren't all the way up until 1982. It goes into, the 1890s, and then there's some issues from 1982. So it'll put in the whole span of the years. It doesn't account for missing years. But if you did want to search this particular title, you could search in this box right here. The Buffalo History Museum website also has an obituary index, and that index covers from 1812 to 1985. And if you do go on their site, if you clicked on that link that I just showed you, there's a nice guide to using this collection. It's actually been digitized by Family Search. So you could watch a video even on how to use it on Family Search. They do have other useful information for deaths. They create a lot of cool maps. You should really explore their website. And one of those maps is cemetery in Erie County. So you can go onto a Google map and just see what different cemeteries there are. And they do have cemetery records of their own. So you could see a list of what they have on microfilm. They have some lists of deaths. Like you can see there's some lists of deaths when there were cholera epidemics here in the Buffalo area. And then you can see a list of the different church records that they have. Another place to try is family trees. And of course, Ancestry has online family trees. And what you can do to just search the trees is if you go into the card catalog and search for public trees, and then you can search just the trees, and you can put in as much information as you'd like. When you get your hits, you'll see different names. Some of them you'll immediately recognize as your family member, and that's mine, Aretas Lyman Root. And the person below is not him, though, some of their information is similar. So if you click where it says there are 35 trees, then you can see a list of all of those different trees. And usually I like to start with who has the most sources. So that third entry, it says they have 26 sources of information. Of course, we all know that there could be false information in family trees, but, finding information on the trees could lead you to documents that these researchers have connected through Ancestry to the tree. So you can see this is the facts tab that we're looking at here. And you've got all of the different sources that they use to compile this information about Mr. Root. And you always want to make sure that you look at gallery, because that's where people have uploaded information that's not on Ancestry. And so here we can see a gravestone image, we can see obituaries, you might see photos of the person, you might see even like a death certificate on here. So you always want to look at that gallery. And if there aren't sources associated with the death, it might be false information, or, it could be accurate information, but just use it as a clue if there's no sources to back up that the items are in the tree, and try to investigate that information yourself. Sometimes city directories have deaths in them. Rochester has lots of deaths in their city directories. Buffalo had that from 1882 to 1892. And the library did a project where we indexed all of those deaths and put them all together in a document. And you can find that on our Guides and Publications webpage if you go to Vital and Related Records. And then you'll see Buffalo deaths 1882 to 1892. And here's a sample from the document. So you can see everyone's name in alphabetical order. It gives their age, and then it gives the date of death. So now we'll move on to church records. Of course, these are an excellent source for deaths. Often you'll see lists of burials. This is from Immaculate Conception Church in Buffalo from 1893. It lists identifying information such as age, name, and place of birth, as well as the cause of death and the cemetery of burial. Sometimes you'll just see a list of deaths. And this is from Calvary Presbyterian Church in Buffalo. And here we just have the name of the deceased, their date of death, their age, and sometimes you'll see notes. So at the bottom listing, we see it says father of Mrs. James O. Putnam, aged 89. So sometimes you'll see family relationships. The library has many church records in microfilm and some records that are transcribed and put in books. And this is a complete list. It has all of the churches, and it tells what type of records are in each. So there is a death and burial column. Part of this guide, the Western New York Genealogical Society's collection is here in the Grosvenor Room, and they have a great church record collection. They've actually microfilmed churches that weren't previously microfilmed by anyone else. So there are a lot of unique records in this collection. Family Search has a great database. It's called New York Deaths and Burials, 1795 through 1952. That's the date range for the entire database, and there are records in here for all over New York. So those date ranges don't necessarily pertain to Buffalo, but there are a lot of records here for the 1800s and early 1900s. And you can just search for a name. I would put in a name and a place. And it brought up a hit that I was looking for. And sometimes you'll see like the Catholic churches, they'll be in Latin and they'll put the name in Latin. So the names might look a little different. So instead of Henry Smith here, we see Henricus D. Smith, and he died in 1911. And if you were to click on that, then you can click on the thumbnail image, and you can see it is in Latin, and it's usually pretty easy to translate. I just did Google Translate here, and it tells us that Henry D. Smith was 70 years old, died on May 10th, 1911, and was buried on May 11th. It's a little bit confusing when you do go into this database and click on a link, because it just puts you right to the page where the record is on, but you're not, it doesn't come up, obviously, what church this is from. So you can view a list of the thumbnail images, and you just look for the title page. If you just kind of scroll upwards in the thumbnail images, you can then find the first listing in the book that you're looking at, and the title page, which tells us that this is from St. Mary of Sorrows Parish. If you have Polish ancestry, you'll want to look at the Polish Genealogical Society of New York State's website. If you go under Research and Databases, and then our databases, and then you can see a list of the different databases that are in there. So there are some obituaries. They index the Dziennik, and it's some other, I believe, another newspaper or two, that's the Buffalo. The Dziennik is a Buffalo Polish newspaper. And it has some funerals, some cemetery records, some prayer cards. So if you click search the databases, and then you can search for a full name. I find it helpful to just put in a surname or even part of a surname. You know how sometimes Polish names have a ski or a ska at the end of it. I just put part of the name, and it'll bring up a list. So you can see where the arrows are. There are earlier deaths like what we're talking about right here, and it tells where those deaths come from. And then in the remarks and other columns, it gives really helpful information like who the parents are, and then it gives the volume and page numbers for those particular records, where then you could seek out those records. About a year ago, the library did a project on Buffalo neighborhoods, and you can access that on the New York Heritage website, and there's a link to that on your handout. And this was in partnership with the Western New York Genealogical Society, this particular record set. They have these records of the Trinity Old Lutheran Church. And we discovered in these records that there are really detailed obituaries in the deaths. The records that we digitized were from 1837 to 1850. And you can probably see these are in old German script handwriting, very difficult to read. And so as part of the grant that we received to do the project, we had someone translate these records, and they just have an incredible amount of detail in them. So for example, this is Johann Michael Zabe, and he lived in Eden. He was a supervisor of a farm and also a baker. It tells the town he was born in, and it says it was located in the Black Forest district in the Kingdom of Württemberg. It gives his parents' names, including her maiden name, Renz. It tells that he was where he was, or he was baptized Lutheran, and the particular pastor that baptized him. It says that he entered an apprenticeship as a baker in a particular town, which is a half hour away from where he was born. And after finishing the apprenticeship, he was in the military for 9 years. It tells when he got married and who he married, where he got married. And it tells that 3 of their children were born in Germany. And when they were 9, 4, and 1 years old in 1832, the family emigrated to America. It tells that they had a 4th child that died in Germany and that they had more children in the US. And it tells his cause of death. So just incredible information, especially early information is wonderful to find. Probate records are a great place to look for deaths, and there are Erie County probate records on Family Search. These aren't keyword searchable, they are browsable. The database is New York Probate Records, 1629 to 1971. If you click Browse All, then you just choose the county. Once you do that, then you want to look for the index. So you just click on whatever alphabetic range you're interested in. The index is up to 1929. And once you find the entry of interest, what you want is the case number. And then there are a number of case files online. Not everything that you see in the index is online, but if you do find, you'll see these ranges of case numbers. If what you need is not online, then you could contact the surrogate court, which is located in Erie County Hall, and you could ask them to retrieve the file and go there. It takes a few days to get them, and then you can go there and use them there. The item in these files that usually tells the death information is either called a petition for probate of a will, if there was a will, or a petition for administration if they did not have a will. So here, Louis Wackerman of Cheektowaga, he died about September 23rd, 1868. And this document is also great for genealogy because it'll list all of the heirs' names and their relationship, the deceased relationship to those people. Census records sometimes have deaths in them. The United States took extra censuses from 1850 through 1880 called mortality schedules. And these recorded people who died within 1 year before the official census date. So, for example, for the 1850 census, the official census day was June 1st, 1850. So those who would be listed on this schedule would have died between June 1st of 1849 and May 31st of 1850. Those schedules can be found in Ancestry. So if you go to search menu and card catalog, and then you'll see, if you search for mortality and census, you'll see the U.S. federal mortality schedules. And you can just search for a name. And this is an example from 1850. So what you'll see, I'm going to look on the 7th line down. There's Catherine Meyer, who was 53 when she died. It says she was female, that she was widowed, that she was born in Germany. And it gives the month of death. It doesn't give anything more specific than that, but it says she died in October. So that would have been October of 1849. It doesn't list a profession for her, but it does list her cause of death, which was cholera. And you can see a number of people under her also died of cholera. So there was an epidemic at that time frame. I know this is outside the Erie County area, but for those of you that might have enslaved ancestors, it's uncommon when the enslaved are listed, named, I should say, in records. And these schedules do name the enslaved. So you can see the examples that I boxed off here. A great resource for African American genealogy. Sometimes physicians might give extra information. So in this example from 1880, the physician who gave the information for place of birth, it gave the county of birth. And it gave a specific region in Germany where the person's parent was born, Baden. And it also, he wrote the specific death dates instead of just the month. So sometimes you might get lucky. There were U.S. censuses for Native Americans taken from 1885 to 1940. And these would have been tribes that received some sort of federal assistance. Deaths are a rare find, but sometimes you can find them. These schedules, they're in Ancestry. They're also in Heritage Quest Online, which is a database that you can use from home through the library with a library card. And these could have been taken every year, but oftentimes they skip some years. And as time went on, I've found that sometimes they'll start tracking people a little bit. So like on the top entry, it said Joseph Johnson. It says last year was on the Onondaga res. And down at the bottom, this is kind of a non-death notification. It says not dead as reported last year. So they mistakenly listed someone as deceased the previous year, but sometimes you will see deaths noted. New York State also had some death lists in them from 1855 to 1875. New York State took extra censuses than just the federal censuses. So 1855, 65, and 75 have death lists in them. These are available in Ancestry Library Edition and also on Family Search. This is from the 1865 census, and these get a little more specific than the federal censuses. They give the person's age and name and marital status, but this gives a specific date of death, so that's very helpful. It gives their native state or country. Oftentimes the county they were born in, if they were born in New York State, is listed, their profession, and then the cause of death. Because of the Civil War, they listed soldiers' deaths separately. So this time frame is a little bit different. So the previous deaths that I just showed you, it's like the federal censuses. It's deaths that happened a year before the census day. But for the soldiers that died in service since April 1861, you've got that 4-year time frame that these people might have died. So you've got the soldier's name, you've got information about their military service here. And then there's even a second side to this information where it has information such as the number of surviving family members. You've got whether they were killed in battle or died due to an illness contracted while they were in the military. Sometimes it lists the place of burial. The 1855, while it does list deaths, it's a little different. It doesn't name the people who pass away. It's a little confusing. It lists marriages and deaths, and they're right next to each other. So to the right is to the left are the marriages, and to the right are the deaths, but the people aren't named. But you do see age, gender, marital status, month of death, where the person was born, and the cause of death. So you may be able to make a case that one of these people are your ancestor. Military records. If you had anyone die during the Civil War, for New York, there are these adjutant general reports. And you would simply, it's this large set of books that we have at the library, but they're also on the New York State Military Museum website. And you would need to know the regiment that they were part of. And we do have books at the library that could help you determine that if you don't know that. And there's some databases on Ancestry that could help you figure that out. And so if someone died during the war, it would be listed here. So here we have a Matthew Andrews. He was 19. He enlisted in 1862 in Buffalo. It tells his regiment, and it said he died of fever December 7th, 1862, on board the steamer Atlantic off of Savannah, Georgia. Military pension files also will list deaths, especially if a family member obtained a pension after the soldier passed away. This is an example of a Revolutionary War pension file. You can obtain these from Ancestry Library Edition and Heritage Quest Online. And so this is the file of Nathaniel Fairchild, and his widow applied for a pension. And it says in here that he died January 29th in 1837. I recently did a class on military pension files, and on your handout, there's a link to that class. So if these are a wonderful resource, and there's a lot to learn about them. This is another example from a pension file. This is from the War of 1812. Sometimes you'll actually see transcripts of death records. So in the case that, sometimes you hear that records get, there was a flood at the courthouse or something, and they no longer have those records. If they had a pension file, you might see a copy of it in the pension file. War of 1812 pension files are available online for free on the Fold 3 website. That's still a work in progress, I should say. I think they're through the S's or the T's. They're around that alphabetical range right now. It's still an ongoing project. You could get a copy of it if your Ancestors isn't online. You could contact the National Archives for a copy of it. This is an example from a Civil War pension file. And so not only, don't just think of the death of a soldier, but when a family member tried to get a pension, the widow, for example, would have to not only prove her husband's death and military service, but if she were remarried, she would lose the pension. But for a certain time frame, the laws changed where if you were remarried and then your subsequent husband passed away, you were eligible again to get a pension through your Civil War service husband. So you might see the death of a subsequent husband in here. These are mainly not online. Sometimes you can find some in the National Archives catalog, and Fold 3 has some of the remarried widows files in them. Fold 3 is a subscription database, but you can also order a copy from the National Archives, and there's an index to these in Ancestry. Also think about the spouse would have had to prove that their marriage was valid. So in this example, she says that she was previously married to William Cortelyou in May of 1847, and he died at Sheboygan, Wisconsin on December 24th, 1854. And then after that, she married the soldier who she's trying to get a pension through. And she has to prove that if the soldier was married before, that other spouse was deceased. So she also gives the information that the soldier's prior spouse, Sally Warden, died in Lamartine in Wisconsin in November of 1860. So think about those other family connections that she might have had to, prove a valid marriage. Bible records. So usually if a family has a Bible, they might have written different important events like births, deaths, and marriages inside the Bible. And one good place to look is in the Western New York Genealogical Society's collection. Here in the Grosvenor Room, there's a card file that indexes the surnames of Bible records. So what they did is they collected a number of transcribed records Bible records from their members, and then they put them together in a few different books. So you can look in the card file for the surname, and which will lead you to these books, which have the transcribed records in them. And sometimes, I think it's rare, but sometimes there might be a photocopy of a Bible record in their collection. Most of the time, it's just the transcribed records that people sent in. So you could contact, there's a Bible record share that you could contact if you wanted a copy of that. The Family Search Wiki, there's a page for United States Bible records, has a lot of links to Bible record collections. We also have medical examiner records. These cover October 1878 through June of 1902. Everyone did not have a coroner report done on them. This would be people who died unattended by a physician, things like accidents, sudden deaths, suicides, homicides. The Western New York Genealogical Society indexed most of the volumes of these, all but volume 8. And we printed out those indexes, and you can use these books in the Grosvenor room. And then you can go onto the right microfilm reel. Sometimes the dates overlap, but the indexed records will tell you what correct volume to look in. This is an example of, this is a longer form. Some of them have less information. This type of form has the most information. Here we see a Timothy Driscoll, Patrick McMahon died. It gives his place of residence, that his occupation was a track walker, and that he was single, 44 years old. It gives a physical description, and it says his cause of death was struck by switch engine 238 Erie Road. And it says the place where he was struck was Louisiana Street crossing of the Erie Road. And it also gives what clothing he was wearing and what personal property he had on him, and also the funeral director. This is an example of a shorter listing. It has some of the same information where it's got the age and her marital status. And this one is interesting because it said how many years the person resided in the city of Buffalo. So it was 1 year. And it gives her cause of death. And it tells that her body was shipped to Detroit. Erie County Supervisor's proceedings sometimes list deaths. So county supervisors' proceedings, they would list, what happened. The supervisor would usually get together annually or more frequently to discuss issues, county issues, especially finances and other important matters. And sometimes coroner reports were listed in here. To the left, we see where I have the arrow, that would be someone who passed away. And the names to the left are those who were on the jury for the examination, the medical examination. And we've got an approximate date of death there. And to the right, sometimes they would list the people who died and the items that they had on them when they passed away and who those items were delivered to. So you'll see family relationships as well as the date of death. Anything that the county would have funded, you might see, this really great detailed information. So the county funded Erie County Poorhouse, and here we see poorhouse deaths. The library carries Erie County Poorhouse records from 1829 to 1952. There is an index online to these. You can see where the arrow is on our digital collections page is where you'll find this. And so here's the index, and it'll tell you what volume and what type of register it is, and the the image number is what you want to access the records. This just shows you what types of registers we have. We have a lot of intake registers. We have some children's registers, some hospital registers, and then the more recent ones, 1926 through 1952, that's specifically death records, some autopsy records as well. Any of the registers might list a death, though. So this is an intake register. It's one of the earliest ones. It shows 1829 and 1830. So if someone died in the home, you can see over to the right there, they would list date of death there. I'll just wait for the announcement to finish. So here's an example from the hospital register. So, you know, the poorhouse had a hospital and a lot of people couldn't afford medical care. So they, even though they might not have been living in the poorhouse, they could have sought care here and they might be listed. So you can see the people's name and age, their occupation, why, well, you know, what they were seeking treatment for, the time that they were there, how many days they were there. And also if someone died, then the date of death would be listed. And then here's one of the death registers. So this is the left side of the register, where we can see, you know, their occupation, their age, when they died, when they were buried. It tells usually where, you know, the cemetery where the person was buried. And then the other side of the register, it tells the cause of death. There's some notes in the middle, usually having to do with insurance. And then the undertaker is usually to the right. The Western New York Genealogical Society has a vital index of Western New York families, which is a card file. The index card file, it's all of names and they're in alphabetical order. Each of the cards has a number on it, and the number corresponds to this source list. The society indexed over 70 sources, and usually it had to do with births, deaths, or marriages. Sometimes it had to do with land. So the numbers correspond with the numbers on the cards. So here's an example to the left, Deacon W. Graves, and it says the number is 64. And there you can see is the listing. That death came from the Buffalo Baptist Association minutes, which were transcribed in the Western New York Genealogical Society Journal. And we have those journals in the Grosvenor Room. There's also this nifty list. It's not complete, but it's a list of different types of records that have been indexed in the Western New York Genealogical Society's journals. So it'll give you an idea of what type of records were indexed, and then it'll tell you the particular issue that you can look in. So here's an example of what you might see in one of those journals. So this was removals from Buffalo to Lakeside Cemetery in Hamburg, and it lists the people, their age, and their date of death. So funeral home records, the library does carry this one set of funeral home records, the Stephen Burns Funeral Home from 1899 to 1994. These are restricted for 50 years. It's a spreadsheet. This is all that we have. We don't have the original books. It's just this spreadsheet. So you can see an alphabetical list of people's names, their address, their place of birth, date of birth, cause of death, place of burial, even has the lot, the lot number, and where an obituary, what newspaper the obituary was in. Of course, you can seek out funeral home records, but funeral homes didn't necessarily have to keep those records. So if the funeral home closed, if the records could have been given to a nearby mortuary, they could have been deposited at a historical society or a library, or the family who operated the original home might still have those records, or they might not have kept them and they might have discarded them. Club and organization publications are another place to look. We have this index that we created. I'll call it the index to various sources. If you go to the library's webpage under our guides and you click on vital and related records, we have, it's called Births, Deaths, and Marriages Found in Local Publications. So this was a project. Some of our staff members went through various publications that listed births, deaths, and marriages, and they put some of the information in here, and it gives the source and where you'll find that listing. So you can see a number under event, it has D for death. And these are some of the publications that we indexed. Buffalo Female Academy, 25th anniversary, St. Mary's Institution for the Deaf, minutes to the legislature, police reports, Board of Supervisors proceedings, Trade and Commerce of Buffalo annual reports. Look in alumni publications. This is that publication, the Buffalo Female Academy 25th anniversary. You'll usually see the women's maiden and married names listed, and it might give a specific date of death here. Look in those club and organization publications that you know your ancestor was associated with. Usually they will have a listing of their members who passed away. Look in church newsletters. This is from the Lafayette Street Presbyterian Church, and it's got baptisms, marriages, and obituaries. And I found that these events didn't necessarily have to take place at the Lafayette Street Presbyterian Church. Local and family history books. Here's a couple of examples. So to the left, we've got the Palmer Families in America. And you can see there's a family unit there, Thomas Force Palmer. It gives his children and gives information about his spouse and some death information. To the right, we have an example, the history of the original town of Concord. And oftentimes there were biographical sketches of people listed. And, we don't know if this information is exactly accurate, but I would say it's more likely to be accurate if whatever events took place around the time the book was published. We have a database called Heritage Quest Online that I mentioned earlier, and Heritage Quest has a lot of books. There are about 28,000 local and family books in it. This is one you can use from home through us if you have a library card with us. So it's a great place to look. The Grosvenor Room also has a collection of 30,000 local and family histories, military histories, transcribed records that you could look in. And I'm almost done. So where to go next? So I told you about tons of different resources. We also have this awesome guide called Deaths in Buffalo and Erie County, Selected Sources in the Grosvenor Room. So these are books that we've found that include lists of deaths. They are in order by date, and it'll tell you what kind of information you might find. So here's where you can find even more information. And I also wanted to point out, I know I talked about a lot of stuff, went over them quickly. I have done classes on a lot of these, larger topics, like as I mentioned, military pension files. I did one on finding online probate records, on Heritage Quest, on the library's digital collections, on using the local history file and scrapbooks and supervisors proceedings, and the Western New York Genealogical Society's collection. So all of those are available for free on the Central Library's YouTube channel, and that link is on your handout. And that's everything that I have for you today. I hope I didn't lose you. Let me stop sharing my screen.